On Mother's Day, my son, a successful architect whom I love with all my heart, came to visit me with a bouquet of pure white lilies in his hands. Amidst the sweet, thumb-lung aroma of a freshly baked apple pie, he took my hand and asked me a question, his voice so gentle. "Mom, has my wife been sending you the $6,000 every month, like she's supposed to?" My heart just stopped. $6,000? For the past 10 months, I had been surviving on food packages from the church pantry, and I hadn't received a single dime from my son. My name is Judith Miller. I'm a 72-year-old widow living in Charleston, South Carolina, and this is the story of how I had to fight against my own beloved family to reclaim not just my money, but my dignity. If you're listening out there, I'd love to know where you're from, and if this story touches your heart, I hope you'll tune in again as I share more journeys in the search for justice. And you, what would you do in my shoes? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. You know, there are some mornings when time just seems to stand still, wrapping up a whole lifetime in a single golden sunbeam. That Mother's Day morning was one of those moments. I woke up early, when the night's dew was still clinging to the lavender bushes on the porch, and the air carried that clean, fresh smell of damp earth after a night of rain. At 72, I've learned to treasure the little things. The sound of birds chirping in the branches of the magnolia tree, the warmth of an Earl Grey teacup in my hands, and the precious quiet of a house that was once filled to the brim with laughter. This house, it's more than just walls and a roof. It's a witness. It saw me as a young wife. It held the first cries of my son, Michael. And it quietly soaked up my tears when my dear husband, Richard, passed away 10 years ago. Every scratch on the oak floors, every faint stain on the wall, they were all letters in the novel of my life. And today, I wanted to add a new chapter, one filled with the smell of apple pie and love. I stood in the kitchen, my time-worn hands etched with the lines of my years, gently kneading the dough. The morning sun streamed through the window, casting shimmering patches of light on the floor and turning the tiny, floating dust motes into little stars. I could feel Richard's presence beside me, as if he were smiling, pleased with the scent of cinnamon and baking apples that was spreading through our kitchen. Michael loved this pie. Ever since he was a little boy with tow-headed hair and bright, shining eyes, he'd always said that there was no pie in the world as good as his mom's. And today, my boy was coming home. For the whole week, I had been living in this sweet anticipation. I'd cut the most beautiful lavender sprigs and arranged them in the old ceramic vase. I polished my mother's silver flatware until it shone like a mirror. Everything had to be perfect. Michael was a successful architect now, an important man with big projects, and a life I could only imagine through the pictures he sent. I was proud of him, so proud it made my heart ache. The boy I had raised with all my love and sacrifice had soared so high, further than even my wildest dreams. I placed the pie in the oven, and the aroma instantly grew richer, fuller. I looked out the window, where the quiet little street wound its way under the old oak trees. A strange sense of peace washed over me. I didn't have much money, but I had my memories, I had my garden, and I had my son's love. I thought, that's more than enough for the rest of my life. I had no idea that the peace I was enjoying was just the fragile calm before a storm that would not only sweep away money, but would also nearly sweep away my dignity. The old grandfather clock in the living room chimed 10 times, each gong sounding with a stately grace. I smiled. It was almost time. I took off my old apron, smoothed down my silver hair that was neatly tied in a bun, and sat down in my favorite armchair, a book in my hand but my eyes constantly glancing towards the gate. A mother's heart, no matter her age, always beats in time with the sound of her child's wheels coming down the drive. And then I heard it. The soft crunch of tires on the gravel driveway, a smooth, luxurious sound, so different from the noisy engines of the old pickup trucks in the neighborhood. A sleek, silver sedan slowly pulled in, the sunlight glinting off its paint so brightly I had to squint. It was Michael's car. Or rather, it was his wife Ashley's car. The car door opened, and Ashley got out first. She was always like that, always making an entrance like a movie star stepping onto a red carpet. Today, she wore a cream-colored silk dress that hugged her body, a pair of oversized sunglasses, and high heels that made a sharp, cold click-clack with every step she took on the gravel. Ashley was like a hothouse orchid, perfectly beautiful but lacking the warmth of the Sunday. A cloud of expensive perfume, probably Chanel, drifted up to the porch, overpowering the sweet scent of my apple pie. Michael got out from the driver's side. My son, as handsome as ever, with his tall frame and dark brown hair, but I could see the lines of fatigue etched around his eyes. The pressures of work, I guessed. He was wearing a simple white shirt, and in his hand he held a bouquet of pure white lilies, large and formally beautiful. "Mom!" Michael's voice rang out, warm and familiar, erasing the sense of distance Ashley had just brought with her. He walked quickly up the porch steps and wrapped me in a hug. A tight, real hug. I breathed in his familiar scent, a mix of aftershave, new fabric, and a hint of coffee. "Your pie, Mom." I could smell it from the gate. I laughed, patting his back gently. "I made it just for you." Ashley came up behind him. She didn't hug me, just placed a light hand on my shoulder, her long, slender fingers cool to the touch. "You look wonderful, Mom," she said, her voice sweet, but I couldn't read her eyes behind those sunglasses. "The house is as cozy as ever." I looked at her, a polite smile on my face. "Thank you, Ashley. Please, both of you, come on in." We went into the living room. Michael immediately placed the bouquet of lilies in the vase I had set out. The white blossoms were pristine, pure, but for some reason, they gave me a chill. White lilies? People often use them for funerals. I immediately pushed that silly thought out of my head. Today was a happy day. Ashley's eyes scanned the room, her gaze sweeping over the old furniture, the faded family photos on the wall, and pausing for a moment on the grandfather clock. "So nostalgic," she said, a word that I wasn't sure was a compliment or a sophisticated form of pity. "Look, Michael, Mom keeps everything exactly the same." "Those are memories, Ashley," I replied softly, and I saw Michael look a bit uncomfortable. The meal was served. We sat around the old oak table that had witnessed countless family dinners. There was a golden brown roasted chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, a crisp fresh salad, and of course the apple pie for dessert. Michael ate with gusto, talking about his new project, a skyscraper that was going to change the city's skyline. I listened, my heart swelling with pride. Ashley, however, barely ate. She sipped her wine and talked mostly about charity galas and the famous people she had met. Their stories belonged to another world, a glamorous, distant world where I was just an audience member in the back row. I thought everything was still okay. I thought this difference in our worlds was just a natural part of time passing. I didn't know that. Right there at my dinner table, under the warm yellow light and familiar aromas, a deep crack was beginning to form, and with just one more sentence, it would shatter completely. The conversation was flowing along peacefully. Michael had just finished telling us about the challenges of his project, and then he turned to me, his eyes shining with the pride of a successful son. He put down his knife and fork and took my hand. His hand was large and warm, completely enveloping my own thin, frail one. "Mom," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I know it's been hard for you since Dad passed. I always feel guilty that I can't be here with you more often. But things are different now. My work is going really well, and I want to make sure you have the most comfortable life, without a single worry." I smiled, my heart warming. "I'm fine, son. As long as you're happy, I'm happy." "No, Mom," he interrupted, shaking his head. "I really want to provide for you. That's why I'm so glad I can finally do it." He paused for a beat, and then continued, his voice completely natural, without a hint of doubt. "I hope you like my gift. Has Ashley been sending you the $6,000 every month like she's supposed to? Do you know that feeling when you're walking down a familiar path, and the ground just vanishes beneath your feet?" The whole world collapsed into a terrifying silence. My ears were ringing. The ticking of the grandfather clock suddenly seemed abnormally loud, as if it were counting down the seconds until my heart stopped beating. $6,000? Every month? The entire room seemed to tilt. The colors of the lilies, the yellow of the roast chicken, the red of the wine in Ashley's glass, all blurred into a hazy smear. I stared at Michael, searching his face for any sign that he was joking, but there was none. His expression was completely serious, even a little expectant, waiting for my confirmation. My throat was bone dry. I tried to swallow, but it felt like a rock was lodged there. What had I been living on for the past 10 months? On the charity meals that Michael's church gave out every Wednesday. On the pennies I scrimped from my small pension to buy my blood pressure medication. On the help of my kind neighbor, who would sometimes bring me vegetables from her garden. $60,000. The number danced before my eyes, a colossal sum, a number that belonged to another world, not the world of canned soup and old sweaters. I could feel Ashley's eyes on me, a gaze as sharp as a knife, waiting for my reaction. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from trembling, though my whole body was shaking. I looked directly into the eyes of my son, the child I loved more than life itself. "Michael," I whispered, my voice hoarse. I've been living on food donations from the church." A silence, thick and heavy, fell over the dinner table. The smile on Michael's face froze, then slowly melted away. His eyes widened, filled with confusion and disbelief. He looked at me, then over at Ashley, as if searching for an explanation. And Ashley didn't disappoint him. She moved like lightning, a reflex practiced to perfection. She let out a small musical laugh, as if I had just told a silly joke. "Oh, Mom," she said, her voice syrupy sweet and full of sympathy. She reached across the table and placed her hand on Michael's, a reassuring gesture. "You've forgotten again. I told you, Michael, Mom's memory hasn't been the best lately." She turned to me, her eyes glistening with a false pity. "I've been wiring the money to you on the 15th of every month, regular as clockwork. You probably just didn't notice the bank notification. Or maybe the bank is having some issues. Their systems can be slow sometimes. Don't you worry, Mom. I'll check on it as soon as we get home." It was a perfect lie. It didn't just deny the truth. It cleverly shifted the blame to two things that couldn't defend themselves: an old woman's memory and the bureaucracy of a banking system. It turned me, the victim, into a pitiable, confused old woman. It turned her, the perpetrator, into a thoughtful and patient daughter-in-law. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, a real chill ran down my spine. Behind that beautiful face and sweet voice was a calculation so cold it was frightening. Her eyes flickered over me, not with concern, but with a veiled challenge, a warning: "You will not win against me." And Michael? My son? He let out a sigh of relief. A relief so obvious it stabbed me in the heart. He wanted to believe the lie, because believing the lie was so much easier than facing the horrific truth that the wife he loved was cheating his mother, or that he had been so neglectful he hadn't noticed his own mother was living in poverty. He chose the path of least resistance. "See, Mom," he said, a hint of gentle reprimand in his voice. "You scared me half to death. You need to check your account more carefully next time." I said nothing more. What could I say? Argue? Scream that she was a liar? That would only make me look exactly like her description, a confused old woman causing trouble. I had lost the first battle, quickly and humiliatingly. I just fell silent, looking down at my plate of apple pie, the pie that only minutes ago had been a symbol of love, but now tasted bitter as gall. The rest of the meal passed in a terrible, forced affair. Ashley and Michael tried to talk about cheerful things, but their laughter sounded hollow and fake. I just sat there, a silent shadow at my own table, feeling the crack in my heart grow wider and wider. Finally, they left. Ashley blew me a kiss from the bottom of the stairs. Michael hugged me again, but this hug was different. It was hasty, a bit avoidant, as if he was afraid to look me in the eye for too long. "You take care now, Mom," he said, then hurried out to the car. I stood at the door, watching the shimmering silver car back out of the driveway and disappear behind the oak trees. When the sound of the engine had faded completely, leaving only the chirping of crickets in the twilight, I felt all my strength drain away. I had to lean against the doorframe to keep from collapsing. The house suddenly felt so empty and cold. Ashley's perfume seemed to linger in the air, a foreign, invasive scent. The bouquet of pure white lilies on the table looked like a mockery. I walked into the kitchen and looked at the leftover food on the table. I had spent the entire morning preparing it with all my love, and now it was just the wreckage of a lie. I sat down in my armchair, without turning on the lights. Darkness slowly fell, swallowing the room, swallowing me. I sat there, in the dark, alone with the brutal truth. I was not a forgetful old woman. I had been deceived. And perhaps even more painfully, my son had chosen to side with the lie. $60,000. That money could have fixed my leaky roof, could have paid off my medical bills, could have given me a warm winter. But Ashley had taken it. She had taken it and watched me live in need, then used my own age as a weapon against me. Contempt. That's what I felt most clearly. She had contempt for me, for my age, for my simple life. She thought I wasn't worthy. A cold fury began to smolder inside me, a small but steady flame. This was no longer about money. It was about my dignity, which Richard always said was a person's most precious possession. I would not let anyone steal it from me. I stood up and walked over to Richard's old writing desk in the corner. I switched on the small desk lamp, its warm yellow light spreading out. I opened the bottom drawer, where I kept my most important things. And I took it out. The old leather-bound journal, a gift from Richard on our first wedding anniversary. The cover was worn, but the pages inside were still pristine. I sat down and opened it to the first page. My hand was still shaking a little, but my gaze had become firm. With the careful script of a retired librarian, I wrote the first line, not as a lament, but as a silent declaration of war. May 12th. It begins. The storm had arrived, and it had shattered my peace. But it had also awakened a Judith Miller I had long forgotten, a Judith who was not weak, not resigned. That night, in my quiet little house, my investigation officially began, and I knew no matter how thorny the path ahead, I would follow it to the end to find the truth, for my dignity. The next morning, the sun still rose, the birds still sang, and the world kept turning as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything was different. The sunlight no longer brought a feeling of warmth, but only highlighted the layer of dust on the old furniture and the emptiness in my soul. Yesterday's peace was shattered into a million pieces, and all that was left was a cold, jagged truth. I brewed a pot of tea, stronger than usual, its bitterness seeming to help keep my mind clear. After a sparse lunch of the other half of a can of soup from last week, I knew what I had to do. Hesitation would only make Ashley's lie more solid. I needed an undeniable truth, a truth from an official source. I needed to hear it from the bank. I sat by my old rotary phone, staring at the faded numbers on the dial. My heart was pounding, a sense of anxiety and even a little fear creeping into me. What was I afraid of? I was afraid of being right, afraid of facing the tangible proof of betrayal from the very people I loved most. But the fear of living a lie, of being seen as a senile old woman, was 1,000 times greater. I took a deep breath and picked up the receiver. The steady dial tone hummed in my ear. I dialed the number for Charleston Savings Bank, my fingers a little clumsy. After a few rings, a young professional female voice answered. "Charleston Savings, how may I help you?" "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My name is Judith Miller. I'd like to check on some transactions in my savings account." "Of course, Mrs. Miller. Could you please read me your account number and provide some information for verification?" I clearly recited each number, answered the questions about my date of birth and home address. It felt strange, as if I had to prove my own existence. After a moment of silence, with only the sound of keyboard clicks on the other end, the teller said, "All right, Mrs. Miller, the system has confirmed your identity. What information can I get for you?" "Please," I swallowed hard, "could you check for me if, over the past 10 months, there have been any deposits of $6,000 made into this account? The sender might be Michael Miller or Ashley Miller." Another pause. This one felt longer. I could hear my own heart thudding in my chest. I gripped the receiver, my knuckles turning white. Finally, the girl's voice came back, a little hesitant. "Mrs. Miller, I've checked very carefully. In the last 10 months, your account has not received any deposits of that value. Your most recent transaction was a small interest payment of $3.12, which was credited last month." $3.12. My whole world just stopped for a moment. There was no mistake, no system delay. There was only a truth as bare and as cold as a block of stone. I had not received a single cent. "Mrs. Miller, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here," I whispered, my voice trailing off. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hung up the phone. The receiver landed in its cradle with a dry, final clack, the only sound in the silent room. I sat motionless, staring out the window. A single yellow leaf broke from its branch, fluttered in the air, and then gently landed on the ground. Just like my trust. So, Ashley had lied. A bald-faced lie without a flicker of shame. She had looked me right in the eye, looked my son right in the eye, and woven a story out of thin air. The pain inside me was no longer a vague suspicion. It was a clear, bleeding wound. But along with the pain, another feeling rose up. A cold determination. I would not let that lie win. I would not let this truth be buried. I stood up and walked to the desk. I opened the leather journal. Under the line, May 12th, it begins, I wrote a second entry, my handwriting shaky but clear. May 13th, bank confirmed, no money, it was all a lie. This journal was no longer a diary. It had become a ledger of truth. And I, Judith Miller, the retired librarian, would now become the chief accountant of my own life, recording every single debt of betrayal. The following days passed in a heavy silence. I began a new ritual, a painful but necessary one. Every evening after my simple dinner, I would sit at my desk under the warm lamplight and open my journal. I started writing everything down. I went through old calendars, trying to remember every time Ashley had visited. I noted the dates and also the small gifts she brought, a thin silk scarf, a bottle of perfume with an overpowering scent, a box of expensive imported cookies. Before, I had thought these were gestures of care. Now, I looked at them and saw only deceit. She had used my own money to buy these cheap offerings as a way to buy my silence, to soothe her own conscience, and to continue her performance as the devoted daughter-in-law. March 18th, I wrote. Ashley brought a pot of azaleas. She said, I just wanted to make sure you didn't feel lonely. There was no envelope of money. April 22nd, I wrote next. Ashley called, said she couldn't come by because she was busy with an important client. I could hear music and the clinking of glasses in the background. A fancy restaurant, I'm sure. I didn't just document her actions. I documented my own life. I pulled out all the bills from the past 10 months. The electric bill, the water bill, the pharmacy bills. They were small numbers, but they told a story of scrimping and saving to the point of hardship. February 5th, heating bill, $124. Had to wear 2 extra sweaters at night to save money. March 10th. Ran out of blood pressure medicine. Had to wait until my pension check came the next week to buy a new pack. April 1st. Received a food package from the church, 2 cans of chicken soup and a loaf of bread. Felt grateful, but also so ashamed. Every line I wrote was like a knife twisting in my heart. Tears started to fall, hot tears rolling down my cheeks and onto the white pages. I wasn't crying out of self-pity. I was crying from the humiliation. I, a woman who had worked hard her entire life, who had raised her son to be a good man, was now forced to document my own poverty, a poverty imposed on me by my own family. This wasn't the life Richard would have wanted for me. He had worked so hard, had left me a small savings, and always said, "You deserve to rest, Judith." But now, that rest had been stolen. I looked back at the pages filled with my writing. They looked so lifeless, just dry numbers and facts. But to me, they were screaming. They were screaming about injustice, about deceit, about a broken heart. That night, I had a dream. I was standing in a massive library. All the books were blank, without a single word, and Ashley was standing in the distance, smiling at me, holding a large eraser. She was erasing the story of my life. I woke up with a start, drenched in a cold sweat. I knew I couldn't let that dream become a reality. This journal, it wasn't just evidence, it was my voice, it was my story. And I would write it until the truth came to light. No matter how much it hurt me, I would turn these silent tears into ink and write an indictment that could never be erased. A week went by. I still hadn't received a call from Ashley to check with the bank like she had promised. Of course not. A liar never goes looking for the truth on their own. Her silence was more eloquent than any words. But what hurt more than Ashley's silence was Michael's silence. I had waited. Every day, I hoped the phone would ring, and on the other end would be my son's worried voice. "Mom, I checked. Something's not right. I had hoped he would see how little sense it made, that he would have at least a sliver of doubt. But there was nothing, just silence. A silence as heavy as a wall, separating the two of us. Finally, I just couldn't stand it anymore. I'm his mother, after all. I have a right to know what's going on. I picked up the phone and called him. Michael answered right away, but his voice sounded rushed. "Mom, is everything okay? I'm in the middle of prepping for a huge meeting." "Michael," I began, trying my best to keep my voice calm. "I just wanted to ask, about Sunday, did Ashley ever check with the bank?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him sigh, a sigh of impatience. "Oh, Mom, I thought we were done with this. Ashley said she checked. There was some kind of technical glitch, but the money was sent. It should probably show up in your account in the next few days." Another lie, a sloppy, copy and pasted lie. And Michael delivered it to me without a moment's hesitation. "Michael," I said, my voice starting to tremble. "I called the bank. They said there was no money, nothing at all." "Mom," his voice sharpened, "I really don't have time for this. I am down to the wire on signing the deal of a lifetime. It's going to change everything, do you understand? It will secure my future, Ashley's future, and your future too. I can't let this little stuff distract me. I trust Ashley. She handles all our finances. Can you please not add to my stress right now?" "Little stuff?" I was stunned. "The fact that I don't have money to live on is little stuff?" "I didn't mean it like that," he said quickly, but the damage was done. "I just mean, don't worry so much. Everything will be fine. I promise. Now I really have to go. I love you." And he hung up. I stood there, the receiver still pressed to my ear, listening to the dead, hollow dial tone. The wall. It wasn't just silent. It was built with indifference and excuses. My son, the boy I had spent my entire life protecting, was now using his career as a shield to avoid facing the truth. He didn't want to know. Because knowing would mean having to act, to confront, to shatter the perfect family image he and Ashley had worked so hard to build. He had chosen his career over his mother. This pain was deeper. It wasn't just Ashley's betrayal. It was Michael's abandonment. I felt more alone than ever, alone in my own home, alone in my own life. I went back to my desk, my hands trembling as I opened the journal. I had no more tears left to cry. All that remained was a terrifying emptiness. May 20th. Spoke to Michael. He called the truth little stuff. He has chosen to believe the lie. The wall has been built. I closed the journal. I knew that from now on, I would have to fight alone. I could no longer count on my son. He had chosen his side, and I would stand on the side of the truth. Even if it meant I had to confront both of them. This fight wasn't just to get the money back. It was to break down that cowardly wall of silence, and to make Michael see the price of turning a blind eye to the truth. The phone call with Michael left a deep wound in me. The wall he built didn't just block communication. It was a declaration that in the battle between truth and convenience, my son had chosen convenience. The disappointment hardened inside me, turning into something sharper and colder. Resolve. If I couldn't rely on my son's love, I would have to rely on my own intellect. I had spent my entire life working in the quiet stacks of the library. My job was to organize information, to find truth in scattered data, and to trace the origins of stories. Ashley might think I was a confused old woman, but she had forgotten, or perhaps never knew, that a good librarian is always a brilliant investigator. And now, I was going to make my own life, my special research project. That morning, I woke up with a clear purpose. I was no longer waiting for phone calls. I was no longer hoping for others to change. I would find the evidence myself. I sat down at my desk, not with the leather journal, but with a clean sheet of paper and a pen. I mapped out a plan. Step 1. Confirm the lie in a way that was irrefutable. Step 2. Find out where the money actually went. Step 3. Face the truth, no matter how ugly it was. I looked at Michael's office number, the one I had called the day before. This time, I wouldn't be calling him. I would call the people who held the numbers, the truths that could not lie. I would call the accounting department. The second time I called the architectural firm of Miller and Associates, I was much calmer. There was no more trembling, no more fragile hope, just a sharp focus. "Miller and Associates," the young receptionist's voice chirped. "Hello," I said, my tone formal and professional. "I'd like to speak with the accounting department, please. My name is Judith Miller, and I have a few questions about some personal disbursements." After a few seconds on hold, a different voice came on the line, more mature and a bit more cautious. "Accounting. This is Sandra. How may I help you, Mrs. Miller?" "Hello, Sandra," I began. "I'm Michael Miller's mother. I understand you can't disclose detailed company information, but I was hoping to confirm some details regarding personal fund transfers from my son's account. I'm reconciling my personal records and have found a few discrepancies." I could sense the hesitation on the other end of the line. Sandra was an accountant, and caution was her instinct. "Mrs. Miller, as you said, I'm not authorized to share an employee's personal financial information." "I understand completely," I said quickly, not giving her a chance to shut me down. "I'm not asking for balances or anything sensitive. I just want to confirm one simple piece of information. My son informed me that he set up an automatic transfer of $6,000 for me on the 15th of each month. This was supposed to have been happening for the last 10 months. Could you please just confirm for me whether that transfer order exists and if it has been executed regularly? A simple yes or no would suffice." The way I framed the question, the precision of the amount and the dates, seemed to persuade Sandra. It wasn't a nosy inquiry, it was the question of someone who knew what they were talking about. She hesitated a moment more, then said, "Please hold one moment while I check." I waited again, but this time not with anxiety, but with focus. I heard the clicking of a keyboard, the rustle of papers, and then Sandra's voice came back on the line, and there was a subtle shift in her tone, a barely concealed surprise. "Mrs. Miller," she said slowly, "I can confirm that yes, there is an automatic transfer order for $6,000 from Mr. Michael Miller's personal account, executed on the 15th of each month for the past 10 months. My heart clenched. So Michael hadn't lied about sending the money. He really had done it. Then, "But," Sandra continued, and that single word hung in the air like a blade. "There's something strange. According to the information I have here, the beneficiary of that transfer is indeed listed as Judith Miller, but, ma'am, the beneficiary account number is completely different from the one we have on file for you in the family records. Have you opened another bank account recently?" "Another account. In my name, but not mine." The world shattered beneath my feet. It was worse than I had ever imagined. This wasn't a simple lie. This was a scheme, a calculated, sophisticated fraud. Ashley didn't just keep the money. She had stolen my identity to do it. "No," I whispered, my voice thick. I only have the one account." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could picture Sandra sitting there, staring at her computer screen, trying to make sense of the absurdity of what she was seeing. As an accountant, she knew that numbers that don't match mean something is terribly wrong. "Thank you, Sandra," I said, forcing myself to regain my composure. "That information is very helpful. Thank you for your time." "Wait, Mrs. Miller," Sandra said quickly, her voice now full of concern. "This doesn't seem right. I think I need to report this to my supervisor, Mr. Bennett, our head accountant. There may have been a serious error or—" She didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. "Or a crime." "Yes, please," I said, feeling the first flicker of hope. "Please do report it. I will await a call from him." The call with Sandra left me in a whirlwind of emotions. Horror at the sophisticated plot, disgust at the act of identity theft, and for the first time in days, a tiny spark of hope. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone else, a stranger, had now seen the discrepancy. The truth was starting to find an ally. I knew Sandra would keep her word. People who work with numbers often have a high sense of integrity and responsibility, and she did not disappoint. 2 days later, on a gray afternoon as I was making notes in my journal, the phone rang. This time, it was a man's voice, deep and authoritative. "Hello, may I speak with Mrs. Judith Miller?" "This is she." "Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Bennett, head accountant at Miller and Associates. Sandra reported her conversation with you to me. I've spent the last 2 days reviewing this entire matter, and I must say, I am profoundly sorry for what you are going through." His voice held no pity. It held respect and the gravity of a professional facing a serious problem. "What did you find, Mr. Bennett?" I asked, my heart racing. Mr. Bennett sighed. "Mrs. Miller, this is an extremely sensitive situation. I've been in this business for over 40 years, and I've seen a lot, but this is truly disturbing." After cross-referencing with the bank, we discovered that the account in the name of Judith Miller that received $60,000 over the last 10 months was opened with a copy of your state ID. However, the other documents, such as the signature and contact information, are completely different, and the person listed as the secondary account holder with full access and withdrawal rights is your daughter-in-law, Ashley Miller. Even though I had prepared myself, hearing those words spoken so clearly by a person of authority still left me reeling. A copy of my ID. She had gone through my things. She had planned this. This wasn't a spontaneous act of desperation. This was a premeditated crime. "I understand this is a tremendous shock," Mr. Bennett continued, a genuine empathy in his voice, "and I am in a very difficult position. Michael is a brilliant architect and a pillar of this firm, but I cannot turn a blind eye to what appears to be fraud and a clear case of elder financial abuse, ma'am. My professional ethics will not allow it." "So, what do we do now?" I asked, my voice weak. "That is why I'm calling you. Protocol requires me to report this to Michael, but I have a feeling that doing so would only lead to the truth being swept under the rug. I wanted to consult with you first. How do you wish to handle this? This is your family matter, and I will respect your decision. But you must know, you have legal rights and protections." He had placed the power to decide in my hands. It was a burden, but it was also a sign of respect. He didn't see me as a dotty old woman, but as someone lucid enough to make her own choices. I was silent for a long moment, thinking, if I called the police, Michael would be implicated. His reputation, his firm, everything could come crashing down. Ashley would go to jail, but the price would be my son's happiness. Could I do that? "Mr. Bennett," I said, my voice firmer now. "For the time being, I don't want to involve the law. I need more time, but I do need your help. Could you please make copies of all the evidence you've gathered? The bank statements, the fraudulent account application, everything. I need to have it in my possession." "Of course, ma'am. It's the least I can do. I will prepare a complete file and deliver it to you personally. I don't trust sending documents this sensitive through the mail." "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. You have no idea what this means to me." "It's my duty, ma'am," he said. "And please, be careful. A person capable of doing this is capable of other things." The conversation with Mr. Bennett lit a new fire in me. It wasn't just hope, it was strength. The strength that comes from having the truth and having an ally. I was no longer fighting alone in the dark. I waited for my meeting with Mr. Bennett with a mixture of anxiety and determination. In the meantime, something unexpected happened. Sam, Ashley's younger brother, suddenly appeared at my front door. I hadn't seen him in over a year. Sam was the complete opposite of his sister. He was a carpenter, with rough, calloused hands and a gentle smile. He looked nervous and guilty, constantly staring down at his feet. "Hi, Aunt Judith," he mumbled. Can I come in and talk to you for a minute?" I invited him in and made him a glass of iced tea. He sat on the edge of the armchair, twisting his baseball cap in his hands. After a long silence, he finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Aunt Judith, I can't do this anymore. I've been such a coward." And then he told me everything. He told me about the accident, about Ashley panicking and driving away, about the victim tracking her down and making threats, about Ashley's terror that the scandal would destroy Michael's rising career, especially since he was trying to land a massive contract with a very conservative investor who valued a perfect family image above all else. "She begged me to keep quiet," Sam said, his voice choked with emotion. "She said she would handle it. She told me she was borrowing some money and would pay it back. I believed her. But then I saw her shopping, going on trips, and I knew she was lying." He looked at me, his eyes filled with anguish. "And she said some awful things about you. She said that you just sit at home all day, doing nothing, and yet you were getting all this money. She said she was the one sacrificing, struggling to maintain Michael's image. She felt she deserved that money more than you did." The final, darkest piece of the puzzle clicked into place: greed, selfishness, and contempt. That was the real motive. The accident was just the excuse, the catalyst. The root of the problem was that Ashley had always felt superior, and she had always looked down on me. I said nothing, just reached out and placed my hand on Sam's. He had done a very brave thing. Shortly after Sam left, Mr. Bennett arrived. He wore a modest but neat suit and carried a thick leather briefcase. He didn't say much, just placed the briefcase on the table and opened it. Inside was a perfectly organized file, bank statements, copies of the forged documents, even a breakdown of expenditures from the ghost account. Trips to the spa, receipts from designer stores, a down payment on a new car. I sat there with 2 sets of evidence before me, one from Mr. Bennett, showing how the crime was committed, one from Sam, explaining why it was committed. I had everything. I looked at Mr. Bennett, and in the eyes of this decent man, I saw his silent support. I looked out the window, where Sam's guilty figure had just disappeared behind the trees. And I knew what I had to do. This battle would not be fought in a courtroom. At least, not yet. It would be fought right here, in this house, at the very dinner table where the first lie was told. I wasn't just going to get my money back. I was going to get the truth back. And I was going to force my son to open his eyes and see the cost of his cowardly silence. I closed both files. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett," I said, and my voice held not a trace of weakness. "Now I know exactly what I have to do." After Mr. Bennett and Sam left, I sat alone in the living room, but the feeling of loneliness was gone. In its place was a heavy, profound stillness. Before me, on the old oak coffee table, lay 2 files. They looked harmless enough, just stacks of neatly clipped white paper. But within them, they held the weight of 10 months of deception, of a betrayed love, and of a trampled dignity. Mr. Bennett's file, with its cold numbers and sharp bank seals, was the brain of the conspiracy. It laid out the method with irrefutable clarity: the fake account, the forged signature, the systematic flow of funds. Each page was a piece of cold, hard evidence of a crime committed with a calculation I could never have imagined in my daughter-in-law. The documents Sam had left, with their copies of handwritten agreements and his belated confession, were the dark heart of the story. They answered the question of why. It wasn't just because of an accident, not just out of desperation. It was also because of envy, contempt, and a sick belief that she was entitled to what was not hers. "She just sits at home," Sam's words echoed in my head. Ashley didn't just want my money. She wanted to erase my worth, to turn me into a useless person, a burden who only took and never gave. I sat there for hours, reading and rereading every page, until every number, every detail was burned into my mind. The initial pain slowly subsided, giving way to another feeling, a chilling clarity. It was like after a storm, when the air becomes crisp and everything is seen more clearly than ever. I could see the entire picture, from the first brushstrokes to the darkest shadows. And in that picture, I saw Michael. He wasn't some innocent bystander. He was a shadow, a blank space in the canvas, an accomplice through his silence. His cowardice, his fear of confrontation, his desire to maintain a perfect, fake life, all of it had created the fertile ground for Ashley's greed to sprout and grow. If he had just had an ounce of courage, a flicker of real concern to ask, "Mom, are you really okay?" then perhaps things would never have gone this far. His silence was not innocence. It was permission. I knew I was at a fork in the road. One path led to a lawyer's office, to a courtroom. That path would bring swift justice. Ashley would pay the price, perhaps with her own freedom. But that path would also burn everything to the ground: Michael's career, the family's reputation, and what little, fragile mother-son love was left between us. The other path was rockier and more uncertain. It demanded patience, courage, and a heart willing to face the truth, no matter how ugly. It was the path of direct confrontation, not to punish, but to heal, not for revenge, but for education. I didn't want to destroy my son. I wanted to save him from his own cowardice, from his blindness, and from the woman who was dragging him down into her swamp of lies. The decision was made. I would not call the police. I would not call a lawyer, at least not yet. Once the decision was made, my whole being felt re-energized. The gloom of the past few days vanished, replaced by a sharp focus, a methodical approach I had honed over 30 years as a librarian. You can't win a battle without careful preparation. The first thing I did was secure the evidence. I couldn't leave such important documents in plain sight. I remembered Richard's old wooden chest in the attic, where he kept his war memorabilia. The chest had a sturdy lock to which only I had the key. I carefully placed the 2 files inside, next to his medals and old letters. Now the evidence of my war would lie next to the relics of his. There was a sad formality in the act. Next, I needed to plan the confrontation in detail. It couldn't be a spontaneous argument. It had to be a carefully staged event, where every word, every action had a purpose. And I knew exactly what the setting had to be. It had to be a dinner, another dinner. The lie was born at the dinner table, and at the dinner table, the truth would be revealed. There was a perfect symmetry in that. I needed a reason to invite them over, a reason natural enough not to arouse suspicion. And then I remembered, the anniversary of Richard's passing was coming up. Every year I made a small dinner to remember him. Michael always tried to stop by, no matter how busy he was. This time, I would insist Ashley come too. I want the whole family together on this day, I would say. No one could refuse an invitation like that. I sat down at the table and began to sketch out the script. I would begin the meal normally. I would let them relax, let Ashley feel smug, let Michael feel his guilt was temporarily assuaged. And then, at the right moment, when dessert was served, I would begin. I wouldn't attack Ashley first. My first target was Michael. I had to break through his defensive wall first. I wouldn't talk about money. I would talk about trust, about a son's responsibility. I would bring up memories of Richard, of how he taught Michael about honor and honesty. I would plant the seeds of shame and remorse in his heart. Only after Michael was completely unnerved would I turn to Ashley, and I wouldn't present the evidence like a prosecutor. I would present it as a wounded mother. I would place Mr. Bennett's file on the table and say, "This is how you did it." Then I would place Sam's file on top of it, and "This is why you did it." I imagined the scene in my head. The dead silence, the look of horror on Michael's face, the panic in Ashley's as her perfect facade shattered. It would be painful, painful for all of us. But it was necessary, like surgery to remove a tumor. It would leave a scar, but it would save what was left. During the days of preparation, I did one other thing. I called Mr. Bennett. "Mr. Bennett," I said, "I've made my decision. I'm going to handle this myself first, but I need a favor. Anything, Mrs. Miller. This Saturday evening, at 8 o'clock. Could you please be near my house? Just sit in your car and wait. If I call, I need you to come immediately. If I don't call, you can go home. I just need to know that someone trustworthy is nearby, in case things get out of hand." Mr. Bennett was quiet for a moment, then said, "I understand, ma'am. I will be there. You are a very brave woman." I didn't feel brave. I just felt like I had no other choice. In the days leading up to Saturday night, Ashley called me. It was unexpected. Her voice was as sweet as ever, but this time I could hear a faint undercurrent of anxiety. "Mom, I was just calling to check in on you. Are you doing okay?" "I'm fine, Ashley. Thank you for asking," I replied, my voice so calm it surprised even me. I wanted to apologize about Sunday. I know you were upset. I checked with the bank again. It turns out there was a ridiculous system glitch. They had misdirected the funds to some kind of temporary holding account. They promised to fix it this week. The money should be in your account very soon. I am so sorry for the inconvenience." A new lie. More sophisticated, more detailed. She was trying to patch the hole she had created. She thought I would believe her. She thought I was still the naive, easily led old woman. "Is that so?" I said, my voice betraying no emotion. "Well, that's good to hear. Thank you for letting me know. Of course, I just wanted to make sure everything was all right." She hesitated for a beat, then added, "Michael told me you invited us for dinner on Saturday, for Dad's anniversary. I'm really looking forward to it." "Good," I said. "I'm looking forward to seeing you both too." I hung up the phone, a sad smile touching my lips. She was walking straight into the trap, completely unaware. Her overconfidence was her greatest weakness. She had underestimated me, and that was going to be her fatal mistake. I looked at my journal. I recorded the call. May 28th, Ashley called. Fabricated a new lie about a system error. She is trying to cover her tracks. She will be here on Saturday. Everything was ready. The stage was set, the script was written, and the main actors were on their way. A strange calm washed over me. It wasn't the calm of resignation. It was the calm of a warrior before a decisive battle. I knew that after Saturday night, none of our lives would ever be the same, but that was the price of truth, and I was ready to pay it. Saturday evening arrived, bringing with it an unseasonable chill for late May. The Charleston sky was a sheet of gray, the clouds hanging heavy, as if they too were holding their breath. All day I had moved through the house like a purposeful sleepwalker. Every action was calculated, a part of the stage I was setting. I spent the afternoon roasting the herb chicken that Michael had loved since he was a boy. The aroma of rosemary and garlic filled the house, a scent of warmth, of family, of carefree days. It was an ironic counterpoint to the coldness that had taken hold of my heart. I was using happy memories themselves as a weapon. I set the dinner table. Not with the gleaming silver set from last time. This time, I used the simple white porcelain plates that Richard and I had bought on our honeymoon. They were plain, honest, and each one bore the faint hairline scratches of time, just like my life. In the center of the table, instead of a grand floral arrangement, I placed a single white candle in an old brass holder. The candlelight would be the only light to illuminate the truth tonight. Everything had to have meaning. The chicken was to remind Michael of his childhood, of my unconditional love. The porcelain plates were to evoke the legacy of his father, the beginning of our family. And the candle, it was the symbol of a single, pure truth that could not be distorted. When everything was ready, I stood back and looked at my work. The dining room looked so peaceful, so cozy. A perfect trap, disguised as love. A shiver ran down my spine. What was I doing? I was preparing to break my own son's heart. But then I looked at the empty chair where Richard used to sit. I could almost hear him whisper, "Do the right thing, Judith, no matter how hard it is." At 7 o'clock sharp, the familiar silver sedan pulled in. The sound of its tires on the gravel tonight sounded jarring in the quiet of the neighborhood. I went to the door, a calm smile on my face. Michael looked tense. He wore a gray turtleneck sweater, as if trying to hide something. He handed me a bottle of red wine. "For Dad's Day, Mom," he said, his voice hesitant. Ashley, in contrast, appeared completely at ease. She wore an elegant black dress, her hair in a perfect updo, revealing her long, pale neck and a string of shimmering pearls. She looked as if she were arriving at a fancy party, not a memorial dinner. She hugged me, a brief, airy embrace. "Mom, you look wonderful. That chicken smells divine. Thank you both for coming," I said, my voice even. "Come in, it's getting chilly out." The meal began in an unusual silence. Michael barely spoke, concentrating on cutting his chicken. Ashley, seeming to feel the need to fill the void, began to chatter on about her work, about an interior design project for a wealthy client. "She has the most amazing contemporary art collection," Ashley said, sipping her wine, "but absolutely no idea how to display it. I had to convince her to get rid of these old ceramic vases. They looked so dated." I just listened in silence, my hand tight around my fork, dated, just like me, in her eyes. I tried to steer the conversation toward Richard. "If your father were here today," I began, "I'm sure he would be so proud of you, Michael." Michael looked up, a flicker of a complex emotion in his eyes. "I think so too," he mumbled. "He always taught you about the importance of honesty," I continued, my eyes fixed on Michael. "He used to say that a man can lose everything, money, its possessions, but he must never lose his honor. And honor is built on the smallest things, on keeping your promises, on facing the truth." The atmosphere at the table grew tense. Ashley stopped talking. She glanced at me, then at Michael, a look of caution beginning to form in her eyes. Michael put his fork down. "Mom, I know I've let you down." "I'm not saying you've let me down, Michael," I replied gently. "I'm just wondering if you still remember your father's lessons." Michael didn't answer my question. He just lowered his head, staring at his plate. Ashley sensed danger. She tried to regain control. "Honey, don't be so hard on yourself," she said, placing her hand on Michael's. "Mom is just reminiscing. We all know you're a good son. You work so hard to provide for everyone." She turned to me, a synthetic smile on her face. "Isn't that right, Mom? Michael has always been a dutiful son." It was a clever move. She was trying to paint me as a demanding, ungrateful mother. But I was no longer the Judith of 2 weeks ago. "A dutiful son," I repeated, my voice like ice, "would not let his mother live on charity food while he thinks he's sending her thousands of dollars a month." A dead silence fell over the room. The accusation had been laid bare. "Mom!" Michael looked up sharply, his voice pleading. "We've been through this. It was the bank's fault. Ashley is handling it." "Really?" I turned to Ashley, my eyes boring into hers. "Then please explain it to me, Ashley. Explain what kind of system error can create a bank account in the name of Judith Miller, using my ID but with your signature? Explain what kind of system error could then transfer all $60,000 into that ghost account and then use that money for spa days, designer shopping, and a down payment on a new car?" I spoke slowly, clearly, each word a hammer blow against the silence. Ashley's expression transformed. The confidence vanished, replaced by a raw, unconcealed panic. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Michael stared at his wife, then turned back to me. The confusion on his face slowly morphed into horror as he realized I wasn't just angry. I was speaking facts I couldn't possibly know. Unless— "Mom, what are you talking about?" he stammered. How do you know all that?" That's when I knew the wall had broken. His defenses had crumbled. He could no longer hide behind excuses. I didn't answer his question. Instead, I stood up and walked to the small cabinet in the corner of the room. I opened the drawer and took out the 2 files. I walked back to the table, the silence following my every step. I placed the first file, Mr. Bennett's file, on the table directly in front of Ashley. The dry thump of the papers on the wood sounded like a gunshot. "This," I said, my voice devoid of emotion, "is how you did it." Ashley stared at the file as if it were a venomous snake. She didn't dare touch it. Her face was ashen, drained of all color. Her perfect facade had shattered into a million pieces. Michael, trembling, reached out and flipped open the first page. His eyes scanned the words, the numbers, a bank statement, beneficiary name, Judith Miller. Account number, an unfamiliar string of digits, and then, on the next page, a copy of the account application, a copy of my ID, and a scrawled signature that was clearly not mine. What is this?" he whispered, his voice cracking. He looked up at Ashley, his eyes filled with a pained disbelief. "Ashley, you tell me what this is." Ashley started to cry. Tears streamed down her expensive makeup. I'm sorry, Michael," she sobbed. "I can explain. It was a misunderstanding. I was going to pay it all back. I really was." It was a confession. A weak, pathetic confession. Michael shot to his feet, his chair crashing backward with a jarring noise. "A misunderstanding?" he yelled, his voice breaking with rage and pain. "You stole money from my mother. You used her name. You lied to me. You looked me in the eye every single day and you lied." He turned to me, his face like that of a lost child. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." He was trying to play the victim, to distance himself from his wife's guilt, but I wouldn't let him. I calmly took the second file, Sam's file, and placed it directly on top of the first. "You didn't know, Michael?" I asked, my voice cold. "Then you'd better explain this to me." I didn't need to say anything more. The moment Michael saw the name of the accident victim on the settlement agreement, he understood everything. The color drained from his face. The anger was replaced by a deep, profound shame and guilt. "You explain to me," I went on, my voice trembling now, "why you chose to believe her lies, why you dismissed my concerns, calling them little stuff, why you chose your career, your perfect fake image, over your own mother. You are not a victim in this, Michael. You are an accomplice." The final blow landed. Michael staggered back, as if struck by an invisible fist. He looked at me, then at Ashley, then back at the papers on the table. His entire world was collapsing before his eyes. "No," he whispered. I wanted everything to be okay." "Okay," I let out a bitter laugh. "You call this okay? Your mother living in poverty, while your wife uses her money to cover up her crimes. And you, my son, chose to look the other way. That is not okay, Michael. That is cowardice." Ashley, seeing that Michael could no longer protect her, became hysterical. "It's your fault," she shrieked at him, pointing a finger in his face. "You're the one who put all this pressure on me. Always the work, the image, having to be perfect. I was scared. I did all of this for you." "For me?" Michael roared. "You deceived me. You made a fool out of me." They started to argue, screaming, blaming each other. Vicious words, ugly truths they had hidden for so long, came pouring out like a flood. My small dining room had suddenly become a battlefield of betrayal and bitterness. I just sat there, watching in silence. I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness. This was my family, and it was falling apart. Finally, Ashley, in a fit of rage and desperation, screamed, "I hate this place. I hate this shabby little prison, and I hate you." She grabbed her handbag and stormed out, slamming the door behind her with a sound that echoed like a final, fatal gunshot. Only Michael and I were left in the room. The silence returned, but this time it was 100 times heavier. Michael slowly sank to the floor, buried his head in his hands, and began to cry. Not angry tears, but the wrenching, heartbroken sobs of a man who had lost everything. I stood up and walked over to him. I didn't sit down. I just stood there, looking down at my broken son. "Mom," he sobbed, looking up at me, his eyes red and raw. What do I do now?" I looked at him, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of pity, but it wasn't enough to erase the hurt. "Get up, Michael," I said, my voice no longer angry, just tired. "You are not a child anymore. You made this mess. Now you figure out how to clean it up." The dinner was over. The play had ended, and all that was left was the naked truth and an uncertain future. After Ashley stormed out of the house like a hurricane, my dining room fell into an almost absolute silence. All that remained was the sound of Michael's choked, intermittent sobs and the soft crackle of the half-burnt candle on the table. The flickering flame cast our distorted shadows on the wall, like the ghosts of a once happy family. The food on the table had grown cold. The roast chicken I'd spent all afternoon preparing now looked pathetic, like a funeral feast. Everything was tinged with the color of ash. Michael was still crumpled on the floor, his head in his hands. He didn't look like a successful 40-year-old architect, but like a small, lost boy, helpless and broken. His shoulders shook with each sob. I stood there, looking down at my son. The anger inside me had subsided, leaving only a vast, ocean-deep sadness. I had won. The truth was out. But why did this victory taste so bitter? It brought no sense of triumph, only a heart-wrenching emptiness. Finally, I spoke, my voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Get up, Michael. The floor is cold." He slowly raised his head, his face streaked with tears. His eyes, in which I had once seen such intelligence and ambition, were now just hollow and guilt-ridden. "Mom," he whispered, "I've ruined everything." "It wasn't just you, Michael," I said, my voice free of judgment. "It was both of you. But she's gone now. It's just you. What are you going to do with these ashes?" He slowly got to his feet, staggering like a drunk man. He looked around the room, at the half-eaten plates of food, at Ashley's empty chair, and finally his eyes landed on the 2 files on the table. They stayed there, as if mesmerized by the weight of those pages. I don't know," he said, his voice trailing off. Everything I've built." "What you built," I interrupted, "was built on a foundation of lies. A house like that is bound to collapse, sooner or later, son. Maybe this is a chance for you to start over, to build something real." He was silent, lost in his own thoughts. The candle on the table sputtered and went out, leaving a thin wisp of smoke curling into the air, carrying the scent of burnt wax. The room fell into a dim twilight, with only the faint light from the street lamp outside filtering through the window. "I'll talk to a lawyer," he finally said, his voice a little steadier. "I'll file for divorce, and I'll find a way to pay you back. All of it, I promise." "The money isn't the most important thing right now, Michael," I said. "What you owe me, and what you owe yourself, is honesty. Start there." He didn't go home that night. He just sat silently in the living room, in his father's old armchair, staring into empty space. I couldn't sleep either. I cleared the dinner table, putting the cold dishes away in the refrigerator. Every action felt like a stab, reminding me of the rupture that had just occurred. When I passed through the living room, I saw that Michael had fallen asleep, curled up in the chair, looking utterly pathetic. I took an old wool blanket and gently covered him. No matter how much he had hurt me, he was still my son. And in that moment, all I saw was a child in need of his mother's comfort. The next morning, Michael left very early, before I was even awake. He didn't leave a note, only the wool blanket, folded neatly on the chair. The silence in the house was even heavier than the day before. I spent the morning walking in my garden, trying to find some peace in the scent of the roses and the buzzing of the bees, but my mind couldn't quiet down. The images from last night kept replaying the harsh words, the tears, the collapse. Around noon, the phone rang. It startled me. For a second, I hoped it was Michael, but the number on the display was unfamiliar. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Hello? You miserable old woman." That voice, shrill, filled with venom and hatred. It was Ashley. "I bet you're happy now, aren't you?" she hissed through the phone. "You've destroyed everything. You destroyed my marriage. You destroyed my life." "I didn't destroy anything, Ashley," I said, my voice cold as ice. "You did that all by yourself. You chose the path of lies." "Lies?" She let out a crazed laugh. "I did all of that for your son, to protect him, to keep his perfect little world from falling apart. And you just sat there and judged? Do you have any idea what it's like to struggle, to sacrifice?" "I know what loss is, Ashley," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "I know what it's like to be alone, and I know the value of honesty. Those are things you will never understand." "Oh, I don't need to understand," she growled. "But you remember this. You may have won this battle, but you've lost your son for good. He will never forgive you for humiliating him, for exposing his weakness. You will live out the rest of your days alone. And I'll find a new life, somewhere without interfering old women like you." And she hung up. I stood there, the receiver still pressed to my ear, my entire body shaking. Her words were like poisoned needles, pricking at my deepest fears. Was it true? Would Michael really never forgive me? Had I truly pushed him away forever, in exchange for the truth? Doubt began to creep into my mind, cold and vicious. I looked around the empty house. The loneliness suddenly felt terrifying. Was I right, or was I wrong? I spent the rest of the afternoon drowning in confusion and self-blame. I sat by the window, watching the leaves fall outside, and wondered if I was just like them, severed from the branch of my family. Just when I felt at my most desperate, the phone rang again. This time I saw Mr. Bennett's number. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Mrs. Miller." Mr. Bennett's voice was as calm and dependable as ever. "I apologize for bothering you. I just wanted to check in. Is everything all right? I waited late on Saturday night, but I didn't get a call." It's over, Mr. Bennett," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "The truth is out." "I see," he said, and I could hear the genuine sympathy in his voice. "That must have been very difficult for you." And for some reason, faced with the kindness of this near stranger, I burst into tears. I told him everything, about the confrontation, about Michael's breakdown, about Ashley's hateful phone call, about my fear. Mr. Bennett listened in silence, without a single interruption. When I had finished, he finally spoke, his voice gentle. "Mrs. Miller, you did nothing wrong. You did something that very few people have the courage to do. You chose the truth, knowing it would be painful. You gave your son a chance to face his own mistakes and become a better man. That is not an act of destruction. That is an act of love, a hard but necessary love." He paused for a moment, then continued. "As for whether your son will forgive you, that will take time. He's hurt right now, and he's ashamed. but he is your son. The bond between a mother and child is strong. Don't lose hope, give him space, and trust in the seeds of honesty that you have planted." Mr. Bennett's words were like a balm to my chaotic soul. He saw the situation for what it was. He gave me the strength to believe in myself again. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett," I said, wiping away my tears. "You've helped me so much." "Not at all, ma'am. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to call. And remember, you are not alone in this." The conversation with Mr. Bennett helped me regain my balance. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I no longer felt hopeless. A week later, I received a letter. Not an email, but a handwritten letter, sent through the post office. The script on the envelope was very familiar. It was from Michael. My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside was a single handwritten page and a check. The letter was short. "Mom," it read, "I don't know what to say, other than I am sorry. You were right, about everything. I was a coward and a terrible son. I let ambition and fear blind me. I hurt you, and I will live with that regret for the rest of my life. Ashley and I have decided to divorce. It's over. I'm in the process of handling the paperwork. Here is the first $6,000. I will send you this much every month until I have paid back every penny I owe you. I know money can't make up for what happened, but it's the least I can do to start. I need time, Mom. I need time to look at myself, to figure out the man I want to be. Your son, Michael." I read the letter over and over, fresh tears rolling down my cheeks. But this time, they were tears of relief. He had chosen the path of truth. He had chosen to face his responsibilities. I looked at the check in my hand. $6,000, the number that had haunted me for so long. But now, it was no longer a symbol of deception. It was a symbol of his atonement. The first step on a long journey of redemption. I knew our relationship could never go back to the way it was before. The wound was too deep, but this letter, it had opened a door to forgiveness, to healing, and to a new beginning. I folded the letter and carefully placed it inside my leather-bound journal. I wouldn't be taking this check to the bank just yet. I would keep it here as a reminder that after the storm, even amidst the wreckage, there is always hope for new life to sprout from the ashes. Michael's letter brought a subtle shift to the atmosphere in my house. The silence was no longer heavy and oppressive. Instead, it was a quietness of waiting, of healing. The first check remained tucked inside my journal, like an uncashed promise. I decided I wouldn't spend a dime of that money until I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. This wasn't my money for fixing a roof or buying a new furnace. It carried a different weight, the weight of penance, and it needed to be used for a greater purpose. My life slowly returned to its familiar rhythm, but with one difference. I no longer felt like a victim. I had faced the storm and was still standing. A new strength was rising within me, a self-assurance I hadn't felt in years. I started gardening again with a renewed passion. I pulled out the weeds that had overgrown during those chaotic weeks and planted new lavender and rosemary bushes. Tending the earth, watching new life push up from the soil, felt like a metaphor for my own life. True to his word, on the 15th of every month, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside was always a check for $6,000 and a small slip of paper. No long letters, just a few hastily written words. For Mom, from Michael. No apologies, no explanations, just a silent acknowledgement of his debt. I carefully placed each check in an old wooden box next to the first letter. The box began to fill, not just with money, but with tangible proof of my son's effort at redemption. I didn't call him, and he didn't call me. I knew he needed space, needed time to battle his own demons. The divorce, the restructuring of his firm, facing his own shame, those were fights he had to wage on his own. And I, as a mother, had to learn the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes, the greatest love is stepping back and letting your child grow up on their own, even if he is 40 years old. One afternoon, I was at the local library, where I still volunteered twice a week, shelving books, when I happened to run into Sandra, the accountant from Michael's firm. She saw me from a distance and seemed a little hesitant, but then she walked over. "Hello, Mrs. Miller," she said a bit shyly. I just wanted to ask how you were doing." I'm well, Sandra. Thank you. I smiled, a genuine smile. And I wanted to thank you. If it weren't for your diligence and integrity that day, I might never have known the truth. Sandra seemed to relax. It was just my job. Mr. Bennett always taught us that the numbers have to add up. When they don't, it means something is wrong with the world. She lowered her voice and glanced around. There have been a lot of changes at the firm, Mr. Miller. Well, Michael, he's downsized. He seems very different, quieter, and he works harder than ever. Everyone says he's changed. Hearing those words from an outsider filled me with a complex feeling. Part pride, part sorrow. My son was paying the price for his mistakes, but perhaps he was becoming a better man for it. That encounter planted an idea in my head. Sandra was right. When the numbers don't add up, it means something is wrong. And I wondered, how many other lonely, elderly people were out there living with numbers that don't add up without even knowing it? How many were also being deceived, taken advantage of by their own families, but didn't have the courage, the knowledge, or a trusted person to speak to? The thought grew inside me. It followed me home, haunted me during the long nights. I looked at the wooden box, steadily filling with checks. $60,000. That number had once been a symbol of betrayal. Could I turn it into a symbol of hope? I called Mr. Bennett, not as someone needing help, but as someone seeking advice. I invited him over for tea. He arrived on a sunny afternoon, in his usual modest suit and with his calm demeanor. I told him my idea. I want to use this money, I said, my hand on the wooden box, to help other people, seniors like me, who might be victims of financial abuse and don't know where to turn. I don't know where to start, but I feel I have to do something. Mr. Bennett listened intently. When I finished, he didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, and in his eyes I saw a deep respect. Mrs. Miller, he finally said, that is a profoundly noble idea, and I believe I can help you. And that was how the Miller Legacy Fund was born. It wasn't a grand charitable organization. It started very humbly. Mr. Bennett, with his financial expertise, helped me with the legal paperwork to establish a small nonprofit. Sandra volunteered a few hours a week to help me with the bookkeeping, and I became the heart of the fund. We set up a small table in a corner of the local library where I volunteered. We put up a simple, handwritten sign, the Miller Legacy Fund, free support and advice for seniors on financial matters. At first, no one came. People walked by, glanced at the sign with curiosity, and then hurried on. I started to feel discouraged. Maybe I had been too idealistic. But then one day, a timid, elderly man approached the table. His name was Arthur, a retired, widowed teacher. He told me his story. His grandson had convinced him to invest his entire life savings in an online business opportunity and then disappeared with the money. He had been too ashamed to tell anyone. I just sat there and listened. I didn't judge. I just listened. And then I told him my own story, of the betrayal, of the pain, and of how I found my voice. For the first time in months, Arthur cried, and for the first time in my life, I realized that sharing my own pain could be a healing balm for someone else. I referred Arthur to a lawyer Mr. Bennett knew, one who specialized in elder fraud cases. We didn't promise he'd get his money back, but we promised we would be there for him. Arthur's story was just the beginning. Word of mouth began to spread. Slowly, more and more people started finding their way to our little table in the library. An elderly woman whose daughter had tricked her into co-signing a loan. An older couple who had been scammed by a contractor who took their deposit for a home repair and vanished. Every story was a tragedy, a testament to the vulnerability that can come with age. Mr. Bennett and I worked tirelessly. He handled the legal and financial side, and I handled the emotional support. I organized small talks, sharing my experiences, teaching them how to read bank statements, how to recognize the warning signs of a scam, and most importantly, encouraging them to speak up. Silence is the ally of the abuser, I said at one of our meetings. They count on our shame and our fear, but when we speak up together, we create a force they cannot fight. Our fund began to get noticed in the community. The local newspaper wrote a small article about us. A few young lawyers volunteered their time for free consultations. People in town started to donate not large amounts, just a few dollars here and there, but it showed they cared. The wooden box with Michael's checks remained untouched. I used the donations and part of my own savings to keep the fund running. I wanted the money from my son's atonement to be used for something even more special. One evening, as I was locking up the library, I saw a familiar figure waiting outside. It was Michael. It had been almost a year since that fateful night. He was thinner, with a few new strands of gray at his temples, but his eyes were clearer, no longer clouded with anxiety and guilt. He didn't say anything, just handed me an envelope. Inside wasn't a check, but a set of papers. It was the architectural design for a small, charming house. "What is this?" I asked. "It's a center," he said, his voice low and steady. "A proper place for your fund, Mom. A place where people like Arthur can come, not to a corner in a library, but to a safe, warm space." I used what was left of my savings to buy a small plot of land at the end of the street. And I want to design and build it myself, as a way to make amends. I looked at the designs, then up at my son, and in that moment I knew he had truly changed. He wasn't just paying back the money. He was trying to build something that had been lost, not just for me, but for the community and for himself. Tears welled up in my eyes again, but this time they were tears of happiness and forgiveness. "That's a wonderful idea, son," I said. "Your father would be so proud." His journey of redemption had begun. And a new beginning, not just for the fund, but for our relationship, was being built, one brick at a time. The project to build the center for the Miller Legacy Fund became the bridge that reconnected the seemingly broken relationship between Michael and me. It wasn't an easy reconciliation, with no tearful apologies or hasty hugs. Our healing happened quietly, through small actions and unspoken understanding. Every weekend, I would bring tea and sandwiches to the construction site, where Michael worked alongside a small crew. He was no longer just an architect behind a desk. He was there, under the hot South Carolina sun, his shirt soaked with sweat, blueprints in hand, constantly giving directions. But I also saw him mixing mortar with his own hands, laying the first bricks himself. It seemed as if he wanted to rebuild trust with his own two hands, to atone for his mistakes. We didn't talk much about the past. Instead, we talked about the future, about the paint color for the walls, about the type of trees to plant in the small front garden, about how to arrange the furniture to create the warmest, safest space for the people who would come here. Through these conversations about bricks and window frames, we were slowly rebuilding the house of our family. One afternoon, as we were taking a break in the shade of an oak tree, looking at the center's walls gradually taking shape, Michael suddenly spoke, his voice contemplative. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, his eyes on the horizon. "About Dad, about what you said that night. He always taught me about honor, but I forgot. I got so caught up in the race for success, in proving myself, that I was willing to trade away the things that mattered most." He turned to look at me, and for the first time in over a year, I saw a serenity in his eyes. "Thank you, Mom," he said. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for being strong enough to force me to face the truth." I just smiled and reached out, gently squeezing his calloused hand. "I would never give up on you, Michael. Never." In that moment, I knew we were truly going to be okay. The scar was still there, a reminder of the pain we had been through, but it no longer ached. It had become part of our story, a testament to the resilience of love. The center was completed on a beautiful autumn day. It was a charming little house, painted a soft sage green, with large windows and a spacious porch. The front garden was filled with lavender. It was more than just a building. It was a symbol of rebirth. On the opening day, so many people came. Mr. Bennett, Sandra, my friends from the book club, the people the fund had helped, and many others from the town. The air was filled with warmth and hope. Michael stood beside me, looking a little shy but also very proud. As I was talking with people, I saw a familiar figure standing in the distance, under a tree, hesitant to come closer. It was Sam, Ashley's brother. I hadn't seen him since the day he came to confess. I signaled to Michael that I would be right back and walked towards Sam. He looked thinner, and there was a deep sadness in his eyes. "Hi, Aunt Judith," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I just wanted to come and see. The house is beautiful." "Thank you, Sam," I said, my voice gentle. "Would you like to come inside?" He shook his head. "I don't think I can. I still feel too guilty." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "Ashley, she left town. She went somewhere out west. She didn't tell anyone. She just left a letter, saying she needed to start over, somewhere no one knew who she was." I was silent. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel pity. I just felt a sense of emptiness. Ashley had chosen the path of escape instead of confrontation. Perhaps that was her greatest punishment, to live out the rest of her life with herself, with her lies and her regrets. "I hope she finds peace," I said, and I truly meant it. "And you too, Sam. You did a very brave thing. You chose the truth. Never forget that." Sam looked up, and for the first time I saw a faint smile on his lips. "Thank you, Aunt Judith." He didn't stay long, but that encounter felt like the final closing of a painful old chapter. The Miller Legacy Fund, in its new home, grew beyond anything I could have imagined. It became a true haven for the elderly in our community. We didn't just offer legal and financial advice. We also had afternoon teas, classes on internet safety, and most importantly, we created a space where people could share their stories without fear of judgment. Michael became an active member of the fund's board. He used his business acumen to help us fundraise, manage, and expand our operations. But what made me happiest was seeing him sit down, patiently listening to some elderly person's story, with genuine empathy and understanding. He was no longer an architect who only cared about skyscrapers. He had learned how to build bridges between people. One evening, as we were sitting together after a busy day at the center, Michael turned to me. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking about the wooden box, the one with my checks. You still haven't used them." "That's right," I said. "I'm still keeping them. I think I know what we should do with that money," he said. "We should use it to establish a scholarship in Richard Miller's name for underprivileged law students who commit to spending a portion of their postgraduate careers providing pro bono legal services to the elderly." I looked at my son, my heart filled with an indescribable emotion. He wasn't just atoning. He was turning his mistake into a positive legacy. A legacy in the name of his father, the man who had taught him about honor. "That's the most wonderful idea I've ever heard, son," I said, my eyes welling up with tears. Several years later, I'm nearly 80 now. My health isn't what it used to be, but my spirit is more peaceful than ever. The center and the fund are thriving, with a dedicated team of staff and volunteers to carry on the work. Michael, after several years, finally found a new partner, a kind, gentle woman who truly loves and respects him. One afternoon, I was sitting alone in my living room, the golden light of sunset streaming through the window. I took out the old leather journal, my journal of dignity. I flipped through the pages. The lines recorded pain, anger, loneliness. But as I reached the final pages, I saw hope, forgiveness, and rebirth. This journal began as an indictment, but it ended as a story of love, a love that was not perfect, a love full of scars, but one that was ultimately stronger than ever. I took a pen and opened it to the last page, a page that was still blank. I didn't write about the past anymore. I wrote about the present. Today, Michael brought my first grandchild to visit, a beautiful baby girl with eyes just like her grandfather's. He named her Judith. I held her in my arms and told her the story of the importance of truth. Life is a miracle. I closed the journal. This time, for good. My journey was over. I was no longer a victim, no longer a warrior. I was simply a grandmother, sitting in her home, surrounded by love and peace. I looked out at the garden, where the lavender bushes were swaying in the evening breeze. I had learned that even after the most devastating storms, life always finds a way to grow back, stronger and more beautiful than before, and that, perhaps, is what true dignity is. Not in never falling, but in always knowing how to get back up. If you were to ask me now, as I sit here on my old porch swing, with my old cat named Richard curled up in my lap, if I would wish to erase those painful years, my answer might surprise you. I wouldn't erase a thing, because it was the storm itself that taught me lessons a lifetime of peace never could. I learned that silence has two faces. There is the silence of resignation, of fear, that's like a kind of mold, slowly eating away at your soul from the inside. But there is also the silence of strength, of observation, of choosing the right moment to speak. And when you raise your voice from that kind of silence, it echoes louder than any scream. I learned that forgiveness isn't a gift you give to someone else, it's a gift you give to yourself. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what was done. It means you refuse to let the wounds of the past continue to define who you are in the present. I forgave Ashley, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved to live in peace. I forgave Michael, not just because he atoned, but because a mother's love is always bigger than her child's mistakes. And perhaps the biggest lesson I learned was about dignity. Dignity isn't in the amount of money you have, the house you live in, or the clothes you wear. True dignity is knowing your own worth, even when the world tries to convince you you're worthless. It's in daring to look the truth in the eye, no matter how ugly it is. And it's in turning the broken pieces of your life into something useful, not just for yourself, but for others. My life now is simple. I wake up with the sun each morning, not an alarm clock. I spend hours in my garden, feeling the cool of the damp earth with my bare hands, talking to my roses as if they were old friends. I read books, not to escape reality, but to explore new worlds. I write letters by hand, a seemingly forgotten art. A few times a week, I still go to the center. I don't run it anymore, but I like to sit in a small corner, drink tea, and just watch. I see new faces, carrying their own burdens, and then I see them find comfort and strength in others. I see Michael, my son, now a man with salt and pepper hair, patiently explaining a complicated legal clause to an elderly woman. And I see little Judy, my granddaughter, toddling around the garden, watering the lavender bushes I planted. My life no longer has high drama or fiery confrontations. It's more like a gentle river, flowing peacefully toward the great sea. But in that quiet, I find a deep joy, a contentment that no amount of money could ever buy. I don't look back at the past with bitterness. I don't worry too much about the future. I am just living right here, right now, in this moment. Listening to the wind rustle through the magnolia leaves, feeling the warmth of the cat in my lap, and being grateful to have come through the storm. Grateful for the scars that taught me the power of endurance, and grateful that, after everything, I found my way back home, to myself, and that, truly, is a legacy more precious than anything else.